You're a shining star, no matter who you are, shining bright to see what you can truly be. Shining star for you to see what your life can truly be. Shining star for you to see what your life can truly be. Shining star for you to see what your life can truly be. Hey, shout out to Earth, Wind, and Fire. I had to Google it to make sure I had the right lyrics. 1975, before my time. But let me tell you, I miss music like that like lifts your spirit, that has, a semblance of like inspiring, let's say gospel, because gospel was such a huge influence on Black culture, specifically on Black/African American music, whatever your preference is. If you are a listener of African descent, born in America, living in America, I digress. Basically, I love like the message of this song. In fact, I'm going to go back and listen to the whole thing before I get too far ahead of myself. Welcome. Hello, shining star. It's me, Malika Lee, host of Answering the Inner Call podcast. And today, staying on topic, and the reason why I incorporate music, let me tell you, growing up in the church, the message didn't move me. It didn't speak to my heart. And I haven't shared really my background and personal story much really yet on here. And I will. And we're going to have guests coming back and have longer form coming too. I'm looking forward to that. I have some really exciting things in store for you this year to come. I'll share more about the theme, because there's a theme this year. Everybody I'm talking to this year that's going to be a guest is on this theme that coincides to so many things, but I'll get to that another time. But today we're focusing on how to be a spiritual star, a spiritual shining star. And my guess is, if you're already listening to this, you're already shining. We're just here to, polish it up a little bit, to share some of my experiences of the things that help polish me. And the benefit of being a shining star and of doing this spiritual work is exactly what the song lyrics say in here. What's your life, shining star for you to see what your life can truly be. I think there's two schools of thought. One I'm going to attribute to, like, let's say the spiritual, could also be religious, and the worldly. The worldly will tell you what you're capable of, what your limitations are, based on where you're born, what your physical body looks like, skin color, gender, etc., etc., etc. Usually that world is riddled with limitation. Why I love the spiritual personally and how it just feeds me so much, especially as being born as a Black woman in the United States of America, consciously and unconsciously, I get messages of limitations based on my bodily identification. But the spiritual speaks to the soul. The spiritual speaks to the unlimited. The spiritual speaks to the spirit that's in each and every one of us. And regardless of what your body looks like, there's not like, oh, well, your spiritual potential is only this percentage because you look like that, or because you weigh this amount, versus this person over here whose spiritual percentage is this. No. We all have the same amount of spirit in each and every one of us that we have available for us to tap into. And, a lot of the great social disruptors that I've mentioned on this podcast before, Gandhi, Martin Luther, Dr. Martin Luther the King, I like to call him, Harriet Tubman, like a lot of these people, Joan of Arc, are rooted, Jesus, Buddha, these people were rooted, and their guiding compass wasn't about the worldly limitations or views of them. If you're a Jewish, Abraham, right? Moses, their value if they just listened to what the world said that they were capable of, and who they were, that we would not know their names today. We know their names because they tapped into that same powerful source of spirit, the great creator that dwells in each and every one of us, that is unlimited and infinite in its potential and aptitude and power. And so when I started really learning the truth, it started to set me free. And this episode has taken me a long time to get to the 5 principles of being a shining star, or what I would call, let's say, the 5, excuse me if you heard me, I just bumped something, or the 5 steps of a robust spiritual practice that'll help you shine and connect. Now, these things were, I curated this based on an invitation from a mentor of mine or / coach that was like, so what is the system? It can't just be special to you. What's the system that other people can do as well? And what came to me in my spirit are these 5 aspects, and each one will probably get more than one episode dedicated to it alone of these 5 steps. But we're going to start with this being the overview. The 5 steps of being a shining star, a spiritual shining star. And what is a shining star? Listen, the star shines because it has light in the midst of darkness. And sometimes doesn't it feel like it's getting mighty dark around here? Anyway, we need more people that are connected to this to shine. And don't you recognize them when those people are connected? Like, see them at the grocery store. I just saw a beautiful, beautiful soul that was so lit up and touched me deeply with my heart, just of him being himself when I went to Chipotle yesterday. I thought I was going for a burrito, but I got so much more just from us vibing out in his spirit. He's like dancing and, having a good time, making a burrito. But his spirit, right? His spirit is what touched me. And the food was good as well. He hooked me up. So we need more of those people. We need you to shine in the way that only you can do. So here are the 5 steps, I'll get to it, that I have identified that really support a robust spiritual practice that allows you and supports you in tapping into, connecting to that limited, loving, infinite potential and power that you are, that I am. And it's a work in progress. Like, this is what I would say is a way of life. Okay, so the 5 points. We're going to start at the top of the star. A star has 5 points. The top of the star, in the middle, I'm going to call spiritual practice. Now, that can look a variety of ways. Like I said, I'm going to dedicate different episodes to really get into a little bit more depth of each of these aspects as I have labeled them and categorized them. Some of my spiritual practices that I've been doing for many, many, many years now include journaling, meditation, prayer, singing. Basically, the spiritual practice is something that I would say connects you. Being in nature, ooh, I love that one. Being in nature, yoga. These are the things that connect you to the spirit. Usually it requires us to slow down, and or it really elicits feelings of the spirit, of love, of peace, of well-being, of calm, of joy. So that's spiritual practice at the top. Next, I'm going to call it spiritual study. This is going to the right side of the star. The right side is the masculine, the left side is the feminine. This is also true with the body representation. The right side in different spiritual studies and different spaces, places are called the masculine energy. The left side, the feminine energy. And I talk about masculine and feminine in other episodes. If you're curious about that, please check that out. For the sake of this, what we're going to call the masculine is the outer expression, and it's also associated with the mental aspect of who we are. So, study, spiritual study, that speaks to the masculine. What is that? That's reading. That's grounding yourself in a philosophy And for me, what's been helpful is having a context of which to look at and to live everyday life. For me, I've had some challenges. I think I also really gravitated to spirituality to make sense of what the hell is going on here. I am a good person. Why is life so hard for me right now? And through spiritual study, my path and choice that really nurtures me, that I've been consistent with for goodness gracious now. Ooh, do I say it? Almost 2 decades? Is that right? My God. Wow. Almost 2 decades is A Course in Miracles. That's what speaks to me. It doesn't necessarily matter if that's your path or if there's something else, the Bible, the Quran, the other spiritual text or other texts are eluding me at this time. But it doesn't necessarily matter what your spiritual text is. And I read other things also, but that is like my grounding force and answered so many questions that I had over the years. Is that's that foundation in reading. So that deals with the intellect, reading, getting an understanding intellectually in a context. Right? That's the mental aspect, spiritual study. Cultivating the mind, expanding the mind, thought, all of that spiritual study. I would even maybe include like affirmations, things like that in there, spiritual study. Also on the right side, we're going now to the bottom corner of the star, and I might rearrange some of the points. These are still going to be on the right hand side. They might be interchangeable. Is answering the inner call. Answering the inner call, the name of this podcast. That is masculine energy. That is action. You know, the masculine is considered the visible aspect, whereas the feminine is more of the inner or quote unquote invisible aspect. So masculine is like outer, visible. Feminine is more of an inward process and considered more invisible, just for the sake of this conversation. And in general, just like, you know, women's reproductive system is inside their bodies. You can see part of it, but not the full spectrum of it, right? Whereas the masculine, beings in the masculine expression of their bodies, their reproductive system is on the outside. So same thing here, the visible kind of in the invisible. So answering the inner call is part of the masculine because it's an action. It's usually going to intersect with other people, and it's part of, let's say, that active, visible aspect. So it's not always visible, but for the sake of this, the action and follow through, and it also requires will, W-I-L-L. That's on the masculine side. Very succinctly, I don't recall, I've recorded it, I don't know if I've posted it yet, about what is answering the inner call. It is receiving inspiration and then taking action on it. So like I said, we're going to get into a deep dive of each of these individually in separate episodes, but that is the bottom right side right now point of the spiritual shining star. Okay, so we've covered 3 points so far. Also, while you're listening, if you are in a place in your life right now where you might not feel like you're shining to your potential, maybe there's a whisper that there's more to life than what you're experiencing, and you're ready to take action on that, I invite you to consider me to be a partner on your journey to being that shining superstar. Sometimes we need support, we need accountability, we need someone who's been doing the work to just save us time on our journey to getting there. So if you think that is you and you would like to contact and explore working with me, please click the link in the bio to schedule a consult, about 35 minutes or so, just to get better acquainted, share what you're up to, what you're looking for, and see if we're a good fit for each other. Okay, now to we're on number 4. We're on the left side now of the 5 points of the star, the left side also being a representation of the feminine energy. So that is spiritual work. Okay, so we talked about spiritual study. Sometimes we stop there and think spiritual study is all there is. One of my great spiritual guides got me together, honey, and I received the feedback that I had been doing a lot of spiritual study, but not a lot of spiritual work. And at the time, I didn't know there was a difference. I didn't understand what he meant by that until, gosh, it took me like maybe a year or some change later to catch up. So spiritual work is the application of the spiritual study. So this is the thing. Have you ever met somebody who might be able to memorize, who have memorized and might be able to quote some type of spiritual text, scripture, inspiring quotes just off the top of their dome, but they're mean as hell? They might have a Jesus is love bumper sticker, and then they flip you the bird and cussing you out. And I'm not saying that we're not all human and works in progress, right? But the spiritual work is where it's time to roll up the sleeves. And that is the integration of the spiritual study. That is the application of the spiritual study. This is the emotional work and the healing work. And I would say forgiveness is in this part of the spiritual work. This is the stuff that a lot of people self-medicate, avoid dealing with those hurts, emotional upsets, all these things that then can get in the way of the fullest expression of the Spirit residing in you, the fullest expression of compassion, because the Spirit is so patient. It's so kind. It's so loving. It's also very powerful and precise. My Spirit has checked me many a times with truth, but not condemnation. It's with care and love. It's a different energy. And doing our spiritual work helps align us. It's kind of like a refinement process. It's a purification process that helps us release things that are not of the Spirit that we've been holding on to and identified with, and that keeps us from expressing and intimately knowing ourselves as loving, infinite beings. So anything related to limitation, traumas, etc., and really rolling up our sleeves and cleaning some of that shit out, that's the spiritual work. And, my guide was right. My guide was right. My life has changed really the fastest when I started doing the spiritual work. You can do the study and it has its place. But when I started really doing the spiritual work, which is difficult to do on your own, which is why I mentioned earlier, if you're ready and willing, and if my style speaks to you, because everything isn't for everybody, I'm here and willing and able to support you on doing the work, honey, to get to where your heart is whispering you and your heart's desires are calling you for it to be. Okay, so that's point number 5. Last but not least, also on the left side, considered more of the feminine, is rest. R-E-S-T. Find out what it means to me. I have an episode that I love, love, love. It spoke to my spirit so deeply. Not the episode itself, but the story I talk about in there around Harriet Tubman. And one of the things that Harriet Tubman, who, was a fierce, fierce, fierce spiritual human being that did amazing works that was considered illegal at the time. Isn't it interesting how some of our heroes who we revere were doing some illegal shit back in the day that could get them caught up? Like Dr. King is another one. Anyway, staying focused on rest. There's a beautiful story in a previous episode. If you look up, I think the key words might be rest and Harriet Tubman. And it talks about such a powerful story that I read in a biography of her or about her that talks about the power of rest. And in this frenetic, anxious society, rest is a very challenging thing for many of us, myself included. My coping, which had worked for me up until a point, was being a workaholic. And so rest and relaxing, it took some time to really get into it. I'm proud to report that it's getting easier and easier and more luxurious. And rest, and how does that fit into the spiritual practice? Like I said, each episode is going to get, or each point is going to get at least one episode, probably many more. Rest requires faith. So let's talk about, for an example, in the story I already alluded to with Harriet Tubman, she went somewhere to raise money for one of her trips to go down south to bring up some more people up to the north that were enslaved. And rest was a valuable and such a powerful part of her story because she had faith. She had done her work and then surrendered. Ooh, that's another part of rest that can get uncomfortable for some people because it requires faith. The same way that taking actions on answering the call. See, there's a whole system here. Remember, the bottom right side point of the star is answering the call. That requires faith. You receive inspiration. Do you have the courage to act on it and execute? That requires faith. On the left side, the part that's not as visible, rest requires as much faith as taking the leap of faith. And we don't talk about that enough. At least I haven't heard it. So you're hearing it here. If you haven't heard it anywhere else, or maybe you need a reminder. So rest, point number 5. So the 5 points, just to wrap it on up for this episode, honey, because we got in there of being a spiritual shining star. At the top of the star is a spiritual practice. Next point to the right is spiritual study. Then answering the calls, answering those inner calls, and then going back to the top and to the left. Point number 4 is doing the spiritual work. That is the work of the emotions, of the heart, to really heal. And then that becomes the embodiment and the alignment of all of the things that we are emanating from us from a spiritual perspective. The joy, the love, peace, patience, compassion. And it takes time. It's a process. And not to say, listen, I'm not still peaceful all the time, but the key is I'm more peaceful now than I used to be from doing this work. So that's point number 4, spiritual work. And last but not least, rest. Rest and surrender. So I'm going to sign off for now. On those 5 points of being a spiritual superstar, I'm sending so much love wherever you are, however this finds you. If this touched you in some way, please share with a friend, comment, support in whatever way feels right for you. Listen to another episode. Much love, many blessings, and until the next time, keep shining.